back to Syracuse for coffee, then off to Ithaca. 75-mile day on the roads. Climbing. Lots of climbing, I think. We'll see. Weather should be good. What's going on today, babe?
Well, we're leaving the Green Lakes campground. We're heading back to Syracuse for some brekkie, and then we're headed down into the Finger Lakes. Ultimate destination through Ithaca to Buttermilk Falls campground.
And how does that make you feel?
I'm having mixed emotions. I think it sounds great. I think the part that doesn't sound great is the 76 miles and 3,800 feet of climbing that it will take to get there.
It'll be pretty though.
My legs don't know pretty things.
So we had gotten on the road fairly early. Aaron wanted to hit it early because of all the climbing we'd be doing, so we'd just have more time to go at our own pace. Me, Ben, and Aaron actually set off before everybody else. We had agreed, I think, to get up and get moving at 7. I even skipped the camp coffee and all that stuff. I basically just packed everything up and jumped on the road, being that, as mentioned, we'd be heading back into town for coffee. We did about 5 miles on the Erie Canal trail. It was kind of cool because we did ride this the night before, but weren't able to see too much since it was already dark. We did break off the trail and head a different way back into town, partially to mix it up, partially because we were heading directly to the coffee shop where we were also going to be getting breakfast. This was a good route too, though. Went through some pretty neighborhoods. I do have the Stravas always linked below, so if you ever want to see the routes we were taking. The one road was a little busier, but it had that big, nice bike lane, so no issues. We went to Recess Coffee, got really, really good breakfast sandwiches here, and everything bagel, egg, and cheese sandwich. Again, people always ask about the bikes. You can see we've got our bikes locked up outside this window, so we're able to keep our eyes on them. Again, I don't even think we were locked to anything. We just locked them to each other. To try and steal touring bikes that are fully loaded and locked together would be a real pain. Anyways, me and Aaron did meet up with everybody else out at the coffee shop, but we still rolled earlier, having been done. Ben wanted to go get a tube since he had flatted the day before on the towpath and didn't have a spare tube in case something went wrong. So he headed over to a bike shop. We headed out on the road together. We knew we'd probably run into everyone else down the road anyways with all the climbing that we had in store for us. I always find these parts of towns and older cities interesting. You could tell they were the really rich part of town at one point with all these beautiful houses, and then some have been torn down and there's some apartment buildings in there. So yeah, I always just, when you go through that area, like this was the first part of town when people made money. This is where they moved, and then they later moved out, and those houses a lot of times get broken up into apartments or different kinds of businesses. After that neighborhood, there was a pretty considerable climb through the outskirts of town or through the suburbs, and then we were out onto this broader road. We were on this road for a long time, had a really nice shoulder though. There were some good views, but it wasn't quite, the total Finger Lakes scenery that we were hoping for yet. That would come up in a little bit when we would Y off this road, and then we'd get more into the country. There was some cool scenery here though. That was a bunch of blue heron nests and things like that out over that lake that Aaron was gesturing towards. I decided to start building out a little wildflower bouquet on my bike bag in the front there. It's funny, when we ran into Mikey, he had been doing the exact same thing. Here we're heading into the town of Skanettles. We had this marked down for one of these burned dairy stops.
What you got, babe?
An ice cream Sammy, half chocolate, half vanilla.
We actually talked to a couple other cyclists who were there while we had stopped in there, but we got refueled, packed some snacks for the road, headed off through town. We actually stopped to take a look at the lake as well, not very long. We wanted to keep moving, super long day, lots of climbing, so we didn't take too long, but we did take a minute to enjoy the scenery. I had actually texted Brad,
There's a
who
Finger
was
Lake
behind
down
us,
there.
that the town was just called Needle Lace until the 90s ska boom. Real ones will get that joke. The climb out of town along the lake of the same name was really pretty. Someone let me know how that's pronounced down below. There were some undulations, but in general, for a long time, we would be climbing up and over to the next lake.
35 miles in, just saw our first Finger Lake. Really pretty. Quick stop for some snacks and water, but we're trying to keep moving. There's a lot of climbing, but we're just taking our time, using easy gears. It's beautiful out here now. We were just on kind of really wide shoulders before, but the roads are much prettier now. I know the GoPro plans it, but this is quite the view after quite the climb. Now we get to go down, and then up, then down, and then up. I gotta say, this is exactly what I was hoping for. Some nice, rolly, beautiful farmland with beautiful lake views here and there.
This descent was crazy fast and steep. Just as I was saying there, how the GoPro, the wide angle flattens everything, you can't quite tell, but that was one of the fastest we had gone so far. So anyways, if you're wondering why it looked like I was alone there for a while, I had ducked off to find a place to relieve myself. So I've just been working my way to catch back up to Aaron.
You are loud, Boydie. Finger Lake's badass, right here.
I don't generally pay attention to the elevation profile as we're riding, but Erin does. So we got to this driveway and she said, let's pull off for a minute and have a snack. It's because we had been climbing what her Wahoo was considering one climb for a long, long time, a few hours. And it was at this point also that Ben caught up with us. He had been riding with Mikey and Ames and Brad, but they were stopping a couple times and he decided to keep moving on. And yeah, ended up catching us about halfway or a little more than halfway through the day. And then next up, it was a long, long, awesome descent into the Owasco Lake Valley. We didn't come that close to the lake. We went more along the Owasco Inlet for a while through Morovia and the town of Locke. Views out here were just stunning, though. Even though you couldn't quite see the lake, we were just going down this descent and looking every direction. It was just really, really beautiful. And you could see we had pretty much the perfect day for it. You can see here I have one of my shirts strapped to the rack of my bike. I only packed a few riding shirts knowing that I didn't want to overpack and that there are shirts that would dry pretty quick. So even though it was wet, I put it on the outside of my rack like that and then I would flip it over as the day went on to get it to dry out. I always bring some kind of strap to either strap to my bags or racks like that. You know, I use it for my rain fly, whatever might get damp the day before. It's a perfect chance and way to dry your stuff out. So a little touring tip if you haven't thought of that before. Leaving, you know, wet stuff packed up in the bags could get pretty musty.
Babe, anybody who doesn't watch anything about Edmund is stupid and should be banned from YouTube. Edmund is a prince.
That's true.
He is my guy.
My guy.
I lure him.
I love it.
Babe, it's not competition.
Well, good, because I'm winning.
Babe, he chopped me.
He chops.
So Aaron had asked how my cat packing video had done, and that's the video showing me pull Edmund around town. It actually did fine, but it just wasn't up to the numbers that normal videos are, and so she was basically going off on all you guys for not watching a video with my cute little kitty cat, who I was now missing quite a bit. So a shout out to my parents, my buddy Dave, who helps me out with the channel and the studio, and my friend Jeff, who was upstairs for taking care of my little guy while I was gone. There was one more reasonably long but not too steep climb on this day. And then it was a pretty steep and windy descent down through Cayuga Heights into the Ithaca area. Really, really cool descent, and the views, as you can see here, were just awesome. We sat down by the lake and tried to figure out what our next move was. We were definitely hungry. I was voting for going to the campground first and getting set up, then coming back into town and eating. Ben and Aaron were saying we should eat first instead. I'm glad they won that argument because our campground was up a very, very steep hill, as you'll see, and we would not have felt like going back into town. On the map, it just looked like it was on the edge of town, but it was on the edge of town, way up a climb. Brad Ames and Mikey got here right as we were finishing dinner. It was kind of funny because they went to sit on the patio and eat at the same restaurant we did, but they walked in a different door and ended up eating at a different place. This is us heading down through the center of Ithaca. We went down through the pedestrian mall area and decided to make one more stop over at another brewery, have a couple drinks before heading to the campground.
How was your day, Dad?
It was good. Remember when you were scared and then we ended up crushing the competition?
Oh, right. We won Ithaca.
Catching up on some Tour de France highlights. But yeah, Aaron made a route to the campground from the last brewery we were at. We kind of went a very direct way because we were just tired from the whole day, but it took us down this road. Our friends went the way that we had originally planned, which was a much better way to go, which took you down a bike trail instead. We rode back into town that way the next morning. So as stated, I don't really look at the elevation profile while we're riding, just kind of the overall profile, maybe when we're leaving in the morning or the night before.
Of course, the campground is a 15% gradient.
So if you choose to camp at the Buttermilk Falls State Park Campground, just know you will be climbing a very steep hill at the end of the day. The campground was really nice. We had hung our food over a tree branch for the night. A ranger came up and told us you're not supposed to do that at this park and that there are no raccoon or bear problems here because it's so close to town. Just an FYI. The branch we had hung it over was dead, so we didn't do any damage, but for future reference, I would know not to throw a rope over a live tree branch at certain state parks. In the morning, it was the ride out of the campground, and we knew the ride out was going to be a little better than the ride in. These cabins look pretty cool, and the ranger told us that they were really nice, and so that'd be a good option too if you didn't want to tent camp here. We did have that rip and descent that we had to climb up to get in, which you will see kind of became a theme of this trip. So it was a quick stop at the waterfall and then back into town down the bike path for breakfast and coffee. So after getting caffeinated and getting some food in our stomachs, it was back out on the road, or should I say the trail. This is the Cayuga waterfront trail. Seems a little weird place to ride a bike, but it showed that you were allowed to, so we did. Anyways, you took that for a while, and then we crossed over, and we were onto the Black Diamond Trail. The Black Diamond Trail was cool. It basically followed Cayuga Lake north along the same path, and then it was a railroad grade, basically. So if you've ever ridden the Gap Trail out of Cumberland up to the Continental Divide, it kind of felt like that. Just a steady climb, but never anything too crazy. Here's where we're actually entering that trail officially right now. We took this trail for, I think, about 13 miles. We were definitely going at a more chill pace. Again, like I said, it is slightly uphill. But yeah, we were just kind of out chatting, enjoying the scenery, a lot of these cool bridges down into the gorges and rock formations and stuff like that.
All right. This whole place is amazing.
We then made a slight detour to Toggenok Falls. I'd been here before, and this waterfall is just stunning. It's hard to get an idea of how big it is, but you could see the bridges way down there in the bottom of the canyon. If you ever get a chance to stop here and spend some real time, because the hikes here are amazing too, you could hike all the way along the rim or all the way down the river, and it goes to the lake. Just stunning views. It definitely feels like something out west, not something in the east. And yeah, highly recommended. We then took another detour because there wasn't going to be a lot of places to stop for lunch, and I'll explain that why in a minute.
Hey, lunchtime.
So yeah, at that grocery store, we picked up snacks to eat right then, but we also loaded up for a lunch for later, so I grabbed a couple sandwiches. So today's plan overall was to ride the bike trail, then see the waterfall, get out on the roads here for a while, but cut over to a route that BikePacking.com has on their website. So we knew we'd be hitting some trails and we'd be going off-road, and that's why we knew we needed to stop at the grocery store and not try and find a restaurant. The BikePacking.com route actually goes a little bit out of the way, so we knew that the day wasn't going to be a straight across just to where we were heading in Watkins Glen. But on paper, we had still designed what we thought was going to be a little bit of a shorter day so we could also have time to spend in Watkins Glen, as the town is really cool and there's an absolutely beautiful hike there. There's also a swimming pool and things like that.
25 miles in, just climbed a super steep hill. Got 1,400 feet of elevation so far.
So yeah, that road climb ended up kind of changing people's plans, and we'll get to all that as well. But it really just sucked the strength out of everyone's legs. It was, getting up into the double digits, and that was before we hit the trails.
Sunday.
So this is on to that BikePacking.com route. This is the Backbone Trail, I believe. At first, it wasn't too bad, but it was some steep ups and downs. And at one point, Erin was like, I just don't think I have this in me right now. So she decided to find a couple country roads to jump back out onto, and we picked out a meeting point where we would meet back up. After me and her were talking about that, I worked my way to catch back up to the gang. Some of the parts of the trail were pretty muddy, as you could see here, and slow going, spinning out a lot. So I was able to ride most of it, but I know there was a decent amount of walking among the crew.
We are on the BikePacking.com part of the route. Just did a muddy climb, but pretty fun, single track leg, challenging. Now I got some gravel, so pretty cool. Doing a little bit of, BikePacking.com bikepacking on this bike tour, so.
So this route would actually cross itself twice. And when we ended up meeting up with Erin, the rest of the crew decided that they were all going to go and chill and just sit down and eat their lunches. Me and Ben decided to do like the lower part of the figure eight to just go ride it and see what it was like, which is what you're looking at now. I'm glad we did, because this was really cool. It's kind of just going through like mostly like cow pastures and stuff like that, but really cool views down to the lake. And I don't know, just a nice ride. I actually had to stop here to re-secure the stuff on the front of my bike, as it had been mostly bike touring. And then I was worried. I just started picturing these tent poles flying off the front through my wheels, and then me like flipping over like that famous scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with the motorcycles. When we caught up with the crew, everyone was just chilling roadside in the shade, eating their lunch, making some coffee, and so we joined them. Then it was back onto these cool gravel roads, and there was also going to be some more trails, which I did not realize.
Hi, babe.
How's it going?
Cool. These Legos are pretty pooped.
This part of the trail was generally downhill, so it was really fun because we were going fast. You could see single and double track. I really enjoyed it. It was a blast, but one of the things I've talked about before is when you do off-road riding, the ups and downs are so much steeper and sharper in a lot of places that, at least for me, it takes more out of you than the long road climbs would. There were also a couple sections like this that were like real full-on mountain biking. So nice curvy, really fast, and fairly steep descents.
Single track, gravel roads, stunning views of the lakes. This is a pretty good day. Oh yeah, and wild black raspberries. Just got a belly full of those.
Erin realized her rack had come loose, on that gravel road, so we stopped for a minute to get that fixed up, and we knew we'd just catch up with everybody else a little farther on down the road. The descents down into the Watkins Glen area was pretty wild. Super fast, super windy parts, and then just also the stunning views once we were out there to see Seneca Lake. And I had made the mistake of thinking that the climbing was all over. Again, like I said, I didn't look at the elevation profile during the day, only before we left. But the thing that had happened is when I was out here in probably 2015-ish, my buddy Brad camped in the Watkins Glen area, and I thought he camped where we were going to be camping, but he had camped in Montour Falls, which is a little farther south and just past Watkins Glen, which is completely flat to get to because it's along the river. We were camping in the actual Watkins Glen campground, which was up another steep climb right at the end of the day. Here we're getting to the entrance of the park. We should have done the same. We didn't realize the pool was going to close when it did, and so we missed out, unfortunately, and then nobody wanted to ride back down the hill for anything. Ames even went halfway down and brought us all back dinner and beer, which was awesome.
My camera can't expose. Everything's blown out.
I would say we actually missed out on what Watkins Glen has to offer because that hike there is absolutely stunning. And like I had mentioned, I thought we'd planned it a shorter day so there'd be time for that in the evening or the morning, but just with the off-road stuff being slower going and some of those steep road climbs, everyone was kind of spent. I feel like if you're planning this trip again, it would have been cool to have a rest day in Watkins Glen, just not head back out onto the road like we did. This morning we did take a slow breakfast at this hotel that had these great views of the lake to enjoy.
Nothing like starting the day with a 20% gradient. A few hundred feet to get up out of Watkins Glen to start the day with a belly full of corned beef hash. 3.5 miles, 420 feet. Not sure if you could see the view behind me down to Seneca Lake though.
600 feet in 5 miles. Nice average speed of 6.7 miles per hour.
Day 4?
Feeling great!
Day 4?
Yes, day 4.
Day 4.
Day 4.
So today's route in general had us going about halfway up Seneca Lake, where we'd get to Dresden, and then we would cut across the Keuka Lake Outlet Trail, which you'll see, really great trail, over to Penyang at the top of Keuka Lake, and then we'd be dropping down to the bottom of Canandaigua Lake before a final climb up to Gannet Hill campground. The route would be 66 miles with 4,500 feet of elevation. The thing is, a lot of the climbing on this day was going to be backloaded, so some different decisions were made, as you will see. These scenes here, I think, are what a lot of people picture when they picture the Finger Lakes. These big sweeping views of the lake with the wineries and the vineyards all around, these big decks they have out back. So people kind of take shuttle buses around and go to different wine tours and things like that. They maybe pop into the parks and the towns a little bit to do the hikes and to check out that scenery. But this is really, like, from my experience of being in a car and moving around the Finger Lakes, kind of the general perception. So it was really cool to do this on bikes and to be a little bit on these roads so the people who hadn't been there could kind of get that vibe. But then we were also able to dig much deeper into the lakes by going off and going through a lot of the towns that may be less visited and the roads that are far less traveled. It's interesting when you do a bike tour like this how much you learn. This is different than anything we've done. Just like last year when we did a BikePacking.com route in Michigan, we learned a ton. Last year we had planned way too much mileage for the kind of elevation it had. The elevation didn't look like much on paper. I would say it was similar here, but in a different way. You learn so much, it makes you think, do I want to come back and try this again? And I could do it the right way, like I was saying, rest days or, bigger stops, trying to maybe cut out some of the elevation if you can. Not really possible in the Finger Lakes. But then the other inclination is always to go and do something completely different. It's like, yes, we could do this route and make it better, but do I want to go and explore and do something entirely new? Let me know down below what your thoughts on stuff like that are. Do you refine trips over a few years, or do you just like, okay, that was interesting, we could have done it better, but we're still going to move on? So this is the outlet trail I had mentioned. This goes between Dresden and Penang. So that was a really cool trail, like really enjoyable in the woods. You just saw that waterfall. There was old mills. So there used to be a canal along here. So yeah, just a really, really great part of the trip. This is us arriving in Penang. I think I called it Penang. I kept, for some reason, like Vietnamese kind of names kept slipping into my mind. The decision was made to stop here for a sit-down lunch. That wasn't really an idea I was crazy about, but I was kind of going with the group vote, and we were also deciding what everybody's plans for the rest of the day were going to be.
More amazing views that you can't see with the wide angle lens, but in a turn of events, I am alone. Aaron decided to make a new route to Canandaigua, cutting out a few thousand feet of climbing. Makes total sense. Our campground's on the top of a mountain, I think. So then Mikey, Brad, and Ames decided they would join her, which made sense for them too. They're gonna get a hotel, swim in a pool. Ben is still gonna go to the original plan as far as I know, but they sat down in this cool town back there, and I looked at the menu of hot sandwiches, and it's like 90 degrees. I just climbed another couple hundred feet out of that town. I'm still feeling fresh because the beginning of the ride was pretty simple. Well, you saw we had the steep climb out of Watkins Glenn, but then it was mostly long, gradual downhill for 20 miles. So then a beautiful Keuka Lake outlet trail. So I'm just not that tired. So I stopped at the gas station, threw some food in the bag, and I'm gonna soldier on. And I think I'm gonna go and detour about 5 mile round trip out of my way into a town and get dinner instead of lunch, you know. Then I can have a drink, be 8 miles from the campsite. Yeah, that's what we're kind of doing on this trip. Everyone's doing what works for them, and I like it. And wow, Seneca Lake looks beautiful behind me. Back on the gravel descent time, it looks like. I saw 15% for a little bit on this one. It's a brutal one. I'm still at 11% right now. Gradient. A missile? I feel like I'm in the tour on a mountain stage, but I'm down here in the valley bottom on a solo break with a headwind. Yeah. If this was a race, the bunch would catch me. This is the town of Italy. I'm guessing maybe there'll be a crossroads up here. So I'm just stopping here in the shade to eat part of my wrap. I was hoping I'd come across a pavilion or something nice, but I don't really want to spend any real time. So shade is all that matters. There's also like the wind, the way it's kicking up. There's only a 19% chance of rain, but when it's 90, you never know. It looks beautiful in every direction now, but I should check the radar because I'll skip Naples if there's going to be storms at any point. Well, no service, so no checking the weather or the maps right now. We'll roll on for a little bit, and hopefully we come to something where I could check some stuff out, but follow the route for now. Gradients were over 20. I'm guessing the average 12, 13. My eyes are too full of sweat to read how many feet it was. I'll probably throw something on screen, but I can't believe I got a loaded bike up this. It would have been one of the hardest road climbs I've ever done without the loaded bike. Oh, thank God we're not going up that, we're going left. It does look like it's getting hazy ahead, and I'm approaching my turnoff point where it'll be, do I go to the campground directly, or do I go in town for provisions? I'm not sure. Way is the massive climb to the campground. This way is Naples. I'm going to get a beer in Naples. Look at that silly cat. We're going to be climbing up one of these mountains. Big dump truck blocking tiny little bike rack.
So just as I had finished my beers, Ben rolled into town to grab some provisions of his own. I stopped at a gas station to grab some more snacks for the evening and for breakfast. And then, leaving town, we knew it. It was 8 miles and a 1,200-foot climb. This was a big reason everybody went to the top of the lake, except me and Ben, instead of going to the bottom. If you came down towards Naples, there was going to be no choice but to do a serious climb. You just could not get around it. I'm glad the rest of the group made that decision, because that steep hill I showed myself going up earlier would have just done everyone in, and that's before that big climb. The campground here at Gannet Hill was really cool. Our spot was back here in the woods, so I guess we had the tent camping spots. You saw all the trailers were up there beforehand. We had seen on the map that there was a pond. We weren't sure if you were allowed to swim in it or not, but we grabbed our stuff and walked over there. One of those things, a clear no swimming sign right there. I'm going to just be honest, we waited till no one was around and we went in anyways. So we were tired. It had been a long day. We missed the pool at Watkins Glenn. We were swimming.
Last day, Gannet Hill to Rochester. Got to descend off a mountain.
So yeah, long descent, great way to start the day, but as you can see, that's been the way we started every day because the night before were tons of climbing up to the campgrounds. So I don't know, let me know, which way would you prefer it? Would you prefer to start out climbing, or would you prefer to start out descending? It was really beautiful through the river valley here. This was a great way to start even after the descent, just to roll through this area. It was rolly. This was kind of a long 5% road climb we did, but on days like this, 5% didn't feel that bad anymore. I find the gravel roads on trips like this to be a treat too. You know, we had brought bikes that were totally capable of it, so it's kind of nice when you're out there on the gravel roads. But as you can see, we have hit everything on this trip, and it was going to get even more interesting as this day went on. Ben had reached into his feed bag and pulled out his bottle of tequila from the night before and said, "Well, I guess now is as good a time as any." So our plan was to meet Erin. We were going to meet her at a trailhead for a bike path. That's what we figured. We based our time on, we knew we'd have a little bit of climbing, but it wasn't too crazy, and it would be these road climbs. So we set a time, and I thought we would easily beat that time and be waiting for Erin to meet there. Erin said she hadn't heard what everybody else was going to do yet, but we assumed we would be running into everybody, and then we would ride the rest of the trip together down the bike path and back into Rochester. But the thing was, the first bike path we thought we were going to be hitting as we got close to meeting Erin wasn't a bike path at all, but it was mountain bike trails around a lake. Crazy surfaces here. They had dumped a bunch of gravel in some of the spots that must be there to keep it from eroding. These wooden bridges. It was up, it was down. I couldn't even ride at all, so I was putting a foot down in certain spots. This would have been so cool at a different point in the trip or on a day ride. This is not what we expected, especially when we were trying to rush to meet Erin, and again, just the loaded bikes at the end of a long tour, you know, so super cool, these awesome trails. Everybody else we saw out there, we're guessing, thought we were crazy because they were all on full mountain bikes and stuff like that. That guy was heading in the other direction. I don't know if these were bi-directional trails. We only passed a few people. No one yelled at us, never saw a sign, so hopefully we weren't causing any problems. So off this gravel road, the trail would have dipped back into the woods on the left. We made the decision to go straight and go out to the highway. I had already called Erin and said, hey, we're going to be late because we are mountain biking right now. So here we are onto the trail. She ended up riding ahead a little farther, and she was going to meet us at a farther trailhead. So finally met up with Erin. She wasn't with anyone because Brad and Mikey decided to stay at the hotel, and Ames was going to ride back to Rochester, get the car, and pick them up. We actually did run into Ames out here. She was able to, leave most of her load back at the hotel with the guys, so she was able to go full on ahead. So we didn't really ride with her. We just stood there and had a conversation for a little bit. So this trail was the Auburn Trail. If you saw the first video, we kind of started our trip on the northern section of the Auburn Trail to get down to the Erie Canal in Pittsford. Now we are riding it from the southern section up into Rochester to rejoin in Pittsford on the Erie Canal Trail. It was pretty cool and had the same vibes as the other section, kind of cutting through the neighborhoods, and just a really cool trail that I bet people use to get around a lot. And then here we are back out onto the Erie Canal Trail. We stopped in Pittsford for lunch. I was really hungry. I didn't really eat a full breakfast or anything, just I had the snacks at the campsite. I pulled off there for a minute because the lock was actually being used, so it was kind of cool to see one in use. Then we stopped at this REI. Erin wanted to pick up a couple things. She didn't really bring dry clothes for that evening or for the next day, so she was like, let's stop at REI and see what they have. We had then crossed over onto the Genesee River Trail. We were trying to decide, do we want to run to the car and load up the bikes and take it to our next Airbnb, or do we just want to go to the Airbnb and deal with it later? We decided, let's just go to the car, let's get it, let's have it parked at the place and be done with everything. We did have a little bit of complications getting back into town because it's the 4th of July and they had different parts of the trails closed, so we had to figure out a detour and do all that with tired minds. But we got set up, got back to the Airbnb, got all showered up. Ben and I decided to head out and check out the fireworks. We basically just rode randomly around town, got some new miles, did a little exploring before posting up for the fireworks. We got super lucky. We walked into a bar to grab a drink. We had actually ran into Ames, Brad, and Mikey doing the same thing, but they were heading back to their rooftop to watch it. And so we went over to this bar and we sat down at this table outside, and the couple next to us said, "This is the best spot in all of Rochester." So we were able to have drinks, and I guess the fireworks were going off literally across this bridge. Just one of those great coincidences at the end of an awesome trip. So let me know what you think of this trip. Would you do something like this? Does it look fun to you? Does it look like too much climbing for you? I don't know. I've made over an hour's worth of videos from this trip already. That takes some doing, so if you want to support the channel, we do have channel memberships and a little store down below. I appreciate everything. Enjoy some photos I took with my Canon EOS R8 and 50mm 1.8 lens. I will see you in the next video. Peace.